Yo, Rabbit Wolverine. Oh, I don't know why I put the whole thing now. What up, Elsie? Okay, cool. She's here. Give me a second. Okay, we got it.
Right. Right.
Good. We got it. Okay, because since I use Restream, right? They
Mhm.
changed the whole entire layout. So I was like, oh crap, I hope it works. And I'm like, damn, these guys like changed the whole entire layout. Um, First of all, how you doing today?
I am doing good. Happy Saturday. It has been a very, very long and productive week.
That's great. I always like, I always love long productive weeks and stuff like that. And yeah, so basically, for everyone that is tuning in now and going to be listening on the audio and like watching on the video,
Mhm.
uh, just know that I was on what was it like last Friday's Women's Wrestling
Yeah.
Talk
Yep.
with Courtney, and like we were talking about SmackDown, and then we talked a little bit about like AEW and stuff like that. We probably do have some like common thoughts and stuff like that. However, what really kind of struck up this conversation of like, hey, can I be on your podcast, is because of a tweet that I had tweeted out, on Instagram, really, that I was like, finally, Tony Khan puts NJPW in front of Clark Connor's name, which I was so happy about. So for today's very, very, very special podcast episode, I'm here talking with Courtney from Women's Wrestling Talk to just talk about how the New Japan and AEW partnership should be improving. Everybody knows my stance on it, including to improve it. However, my audience don't know much about you, so I'm going to give you the floor, give them an introduction, and let's start from there.
Yeah, so let me just introduce myself. My name is Courtney Rice. Of course, I'm hailing from the Garden State. You may recognize me from Women's Wrestling Talk. Pretty much since my background's PR, they always call me the Princess of PR, but also they call me the Timeless Elite because mostly I focus a lot on the AEW side. I do watch alongs every Wednesday on Dynamite. I will be doing a watch along tomorrow for Revolution. So there are so many counterparts in this. And this is actually one of the first times we are talking about this partnership because we've talked a little bit on this on Women's Wrestling Talk. And I just think there are some things that I kind of wish they did fix because it's great. You're New Japan, you have Stardom, you have CMLL. Great. But there seems to be a little bit of a flex because especially when they had Forbidden Door last year, because I was like, okay, I was very excited, but it wasn't that much stars from New Japan. I mean, there was a few. I mean, of course, you had Zack Sabre going against Orange Cassidy. You had Tanahashi teaming up with the Acclaim to take on the Young Bucks and Okada. And then, of course, you had the IWGP Championship. Jon Moxley defended, and he did lose to Naito. And also Mina Shirokana from Stardom taking on Toni Storm for the AEW Women's title. I just think there are a few things that I wish I could fix because I don't think many people, well, we know what New Japan is, but I think a lot of people in the bigger audience, because I know they're trying to enter mainstream, don't know what New Japan is. And also for me, when I was watching Mercedes appearance on the Sherry Shepherd and she was talking about the belt, I don't think she had a little bit of a snippet on New Japan because she's training New Japan Strong Women's Champion. So it would have been okay if she had like a sentence on what it is, because not many people don't know what New Japan is or the history behind it, and especially with Stardom. And I know AEW does a good job doing promos talking about like Mina, and then when Mariah was in Stardom, I just think the problem is kind of capitalizing a bit, because the one thing I did talk about the last couple days is they didn't utilize Mariah May as a heel. Like how she is now, they didn't capitalize on that as being her ruthless when she was champion. And that's the thing that really kind of bothered me, because when I was seeing some of her clips in Stardom, and I'm like, this girl is ruthless. Like she has something there, and it just kind of watered a bit. And also one of the things that really bothered me a bit, it's like Tanahashi is in his farewell tour. It's like, how you're not capitalizing on that? He's on his farewell tour.
Yeah, we are starting strong right off the gate. I I totally agree with those points. I do agree that they do end up missing certain type of moments to capitalize on it and to further the story, whether that's over on the AEW side of things or, you know, fly them out over to Japan and get like all the passport stuff situated. So that way stories can transfer over and then it could be a nice little like, hey guys, we're all in this together as a community. Let's support both New Japan and AEW when we do these crossover stories. The same thing with like, you know, the whole Forbidden Door stuff. So Forbidden Door as a concept is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
However, I just don't think that every year is a good idea to do it only because of like, who else can you get if Tony Khan is not signing certain people from New Japan to call it like a Forbidden Door, you know? And then if CMLL doesn't get the spotlight in Forbidden Door, let's say, then how is it really like a Forbidden Door, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's one of those things of like, yeah, it's a slippery slope of like, how can we maximize all the wrestlers that we have, all the partnerships that we have? And it is like a give or take kind of deal. There was something interesting that you brought up about like the partnership moving into like how Mariah May has this like mean streak and like the difference and stuff. Oh, okay, I know what it was. So in like maybe one or two sentences, how would you describe New Japan Pro Wrestling to audiences that do not know what New Japan is?
I think it's probably one of the people don't realize the history behind New Japan, and it's like one of the prominent wrestling promotions in Japan. And also with the fact, not only AEW, there are a lot of WWE stars that came from New Japan. Chris Jericho came from New Japan. Eddie Guerrero wrestled in New Japan. So there are a lot of many stars, and like they did do snippets of it, but it is so cool. And like even Chris Jericho now, he's in AEW. Like he should at least, because he's one of the people that wrestled in his early years when he started wrestling. So that's something to really kind of lean into with that. And also another thing too, there's not that many AEW stars that ever flown into Japan.
Yeah,
and I think that's the thing I noticed too, because it's like some of the stars that have never been, like the Acclaim's never been to Japan.
Yeah.
Daniel Garcia's never been to Japan. Private Party's never been to Japan. Julia Hart's never been to Japan.
We like it's almost all the roster that hasn't been to Japan, and like we bring this up because Japan is obviously, well, New Japan I should say. New Japan is known for their tournaments. Like right now we're just in the start of the New Japan Cup, which to me this time around I like the fact that there's no AEW stars. Even though I did say in one of my live streams that Jack Perry should have been in the New Japan Cup and we should have kicked out like Chase Owens because it's just taking up space at this point. But Jack Perry should have been there because, which by the way, you're probably gonna have to help me out with this. Has AEW commentators mentioned anything about Jack Perry still being in House of Torture? No? Oh my God.
Like, I don't think they mentioned it after he dropped the belt to Daniel Garcia at Full Gear.
Okay, and nothing, oh, man. See, this is what we talk about, like the miss opportunities, because you know, to be honest, when Jack Perry did like surprise everybody and like attacked Shota Umino first, I was like, oh shit, what are we doing? You know, I was like, oh my God, this might get me back to like peeking in a little bit to be like, hey, what you guys doing? And then he joins House of Torture to play the scapegoat character, which is brilliant at this point. Look, man, if you're going to be the scapegoat for what happened between him and CM Punk, run with it. Yeah, because that's money. That's money. So I was so invested into that. And then to hear that, like, oh my God, like they don't talk about it. But yeah, I would like Jack Perry in you know, the New Japan Cup. The Acclaimed could have been in World Tag League because they're not junior have weight limit, so they could have been there. Who in AEW?
And you know it's funny because
what's up?
I think I met Anthony Bowens recently. And he's the sweetest person ever. And it's funny because him and Max always talked about wrestling in Japan. Always talked about wrestling in Japan numerous times, and they never had the chance to do it. And especially because it would have been so cool with their hero, Tanahashi, win, because that's one of their wrestling heroes is Tanahashi.
Yeah.
But you could continue.
No, you're totally fine. Thanks for adding that like into that too. Like I was just trying to think of like who in AEW on the roster fits the junior weight limit, which is like 205-ish, like a cruiserweight.
Daniel Garcia. Would Daniel Garcia be one?
I mean, he probably would fit in there, but like, are there any tag teams that are like small tag teams?
Oh my god.
And when I say small tag teams, I mean in like body wise.
I'm trying to think of some people. I mean, Private Party's one. I mean,
okay, all right. We'll throw them in like the junior tag division. I do know that like during it should have been like a little bit after the.
Oh, sorry, not Private Party. Top Flight's another one. That's very.
Top Flight could have been in there too, and like I use your help to bring these teams up because New Japan actually brought in stars that like were in TNA and like freelancers into their Super Junior, just regular Super Junior tournament, and everybody loved that. So I don't understand why like there's this weird thing that goes on with AEW where like the Japanese stars have to come over to the US and sometimes look like a fool. We could touch on Ishii, like that dude. But like they come over here and they get used here, but not much AEW stars are going over there. That's not like a John Moxley. That's not like a Claudio Castagnoli, you know?
Mm-hmm. And it's so ironic your reigning New Japan Strong Women's Champion is on the AEW roster.
Yeah. Okay, let's just quickly talk about the New Japan Strong, okay? Which basically I'm not gonna say like anything bad about Mercedes. It's just the branding. It's just the branding that I have a problem with because New Japan decided to completely take away New Japan Strong and just keep the New Japan Strong name as the pay-per-views. This was bad because during the pandemic, it was made for that. It was made for that to keep everybody in the loop, have wrestlers wrestle. And the good thing that came out of it was that the fans was gravitating towards watching the weekly shows. And then when the pay-per-view came, they had sold out shows. Sold out venues and stuff like that, to where like you had the revolving door for the freelancers to come in, and then you had your regular New Japan stars for the New Japan Strong. So that way, when you have champions, it means something. And if it would have kept going, Mercedes would have been the face of the New Japan Strong women's side. And then we would have had different types of women that are freelancers that come in, do something with like the weekly shows and then the pay-per-view. So that way it could feel like, okay, she's defending the title because it's a brand name and she really like respects it, means it. She's going to go out there, give 110%. Rather than feeling like, oh, I have a belt, so let me go walk around as like an accessory. And it's like, New Japan, what are we doing? The only reason why we no longer have the New Japan Strong weekly shows is because the referee that was there got hired by WWE, so he's over at WWE. Okay. So basically, they didn't really find a replacement. And you could say that it could be like a money issue kind of thing because it could have been a lot of money to still set up shop. Even though they have the LA dojo, but it could be a bunch of things, but that's essentially what happened because it was kind of weird. I watching WWE programming and like on NXT, I was like, I know that referee. So, so I was like, oh, that's what happened, but I wish that we still had the New Japan Strong weekly shows, because it would bring out so many different talents. The women would have had extra time. The women would have had extra places to wrestle. They could have been shipped over to Japan to go wrestle for Stardom, bring Stardom members in, the whole works. But yeah, that's basically the New Japan Strong story. And I don't know if you want to comment on that, but go ahead.
I mean, you kind of laid it out a bit. And I have nothing against Mercedes wrestling wise. She's a really great wrestler. It's just like, the problem I always have is just like, I know you're the New Japan Strong Women's Champion, but it's like you have 4 belts. You have 4. It's like, and it's hard to do because tomorrow she's facing off against Momo Watanabe, who won the International Women's Cup. She's facing off against her. She faced off against her before. Great. But it's like, it's gonna be really kind of hard because it's like, who's next she's gonna face? Like, I would
Yeah,
love for her to do like an open challenger. I mean, I know you're the CEO lady, but I would love for you to do an open challenge on the New Japan Strong side.
yeah, man. Like that's the thing, and this goes back to capitalizing on those moments. I really do miss now in wrestling the idea of creating angles, so that way you know who's like next up in line. She has 4 belts. Like, how do you try to defend all 4 belts? Without trying to make one look weaker than the other, or like when one gets defended, like once a year, like why would you want to like have that there? But other than us like sharing our grievances out like the way that we are, because this isn't really structured, but I love this.
No?
It's just a conversation about it.
Yes.
So we know that not many people know about New Japan Pro Wrestling, or if they do, they know it through AEW whenever a New Japan star goes on Collision and the once no longer Rampage. How did in your opinion, since like you do the AEW watch-alongs, do you do the watch-alongs for Collision and once a long time ago Rampage?
No, I only do just Dynamite and
Dynamite?
pay-per-views. Pay-per-views.
Okay, well, do you watch Collision on like your own time?
Yes, I do watch
Okay.
Collision. I do watch Rampage before it got canceled. But
Okay, cool. Because my question was that since most of the New Japan guys show up on Collision, which I think it does them a huge disservice, how do you feel about how they get represented as New Japan talent on AEW?
it's very hard because I just think they could have been a little bit more of a build-up on who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like, even when I saw last week, the New Japan Strong Heavyweight Champion, Gabe Kidd is his name?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Gabe
Yeah.
Kidd was there. I mean, he's no stranger for it, but, I mean, he's been down this rodeo before because he beat Eddie Kingston for the title, and he broke his leg.
Yep.
So, and now he wants to pick a fight with Mark Briscoe, which they have a long story history if you go way back. So
Yeah.
I think with him, I mean, yeah, he's a big of a talker, but I think it just kind of needs to be a little bit more structured on Collision, because I understand you're trying to fill in some of that stuff on Saturday nights, but I think it would have been best to do it on your main flagship show, Dynamite, because that's kind of like a snippet. And like you could at least preview it before Collision, because that can get people hyping up, because Dynamite is your main show. You should at least do that, because I mean, I only know, like I said, I only know who Gabe Kidd is because he beat Eddie Kingston for the title. And also he has history with the Briscoes.
Yeah.
So I think that's always too, and I think a lot of times people, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people really know a little bit about New Japan because there are some stars like, as I mentioned, Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega, they all wrestled in New Japan. Also, Orange Cassidy, he wrestled in New Japan before he was in AEW, before he was signed. So there's a lot of history in there. I mean, I do like where some of the commentators talk about the history when Ishii came out with Orange Cassidy. They used to be tag team partners because they tag team. It was like them two and Chris Statlander that tag team together in New Japan. So I did like the snippets in there. So I think that's something they need to keep going with consistently, because not a lot of people know who it is. And I think that's something with the commentators, some of them have gotten better at, but just really bringing that background on why New Japan, why is it really important, and why is it important to that wrestler.
Okay, so you brought up Ishii. By the way, it's just Ishii, not Ishii. I blame Eddie Kingston for doing the Ishii. Like, no, it's just Ishii. I'm sorry.
Oh, Ishii?
It's
okay,
Ishii.
sorry.
It's just Ishii. That's yeah. The first time you saw Ishii, was it on AEW?
Yeah, it was on AEW.
It was?
When
Okay.
Orange Cassidy, he was laid out, and Ish came out, and then Tony Schiavone was talking about the history between Orange Cassidy and Ish. And I think that was when Orange Cassidy was feuding with Zack Sabre Jr. because he had his boys come out.
Oh yeah, probably TMDK at the time.
Yep.
Yeah, because Suzuki-gun was already like abolished. Suzuki was like, "Guys, I'm done. You go off on your own." So, what are your first impressions of Ishii since you got introduced to him as an AEW fan?
Well, there was a lot about him where I
Mm-hmm.
was really impressed. Match wise, I will say he was really good. I did enjoy the match he had with Sword Strickland when he was champion. That was a really
Mm-hmm.
good solid match between the two of them. I mean, I thought that was gonna. I mean, I know they were not gonna drop the title to Sword, but that was a really good match
Yeah,
between them. I believe he faced off against Will Ospreay before on AEW. I want to say I could be wrong,
probably.
but he's faced off with a lot of stars in AEW, and even against like Chris Jericho is one, and also really putting a solid in. He doesn't say much, but I did
He
see
never
him.
does.
He doesn't, but I did see him chuckle a smile when Willow Nightingale came out.
Yeah,
I did see him chuckle a bit.
I only asked because he's dubbed as the Stone Pitbull, and in New Japan, since everybody like sticks to their character and stuff like that, when Ishii comes out, you can definitely see it in his eyes. Like this guy has like daggers in his damn eyes, so like if you try crossing him, it's like okay, I'm not gonna mess with him. I'm gonna go cross the street. You stay over there, kind of deal. So I was just wondering if like that translated over to like AEW.
I think he's very intimidating with the fact
Okay.
because there were some stars where like they thought they were gonna beat him, but he just came right back. Like he came back in a heartbeat, and it's like this guy can't even break a sweat.
Yeah, that's true. I've never seen him sweat in any of his matches. This guy like absorbs the hardest of hardest hits, and I'm like, bro, what the hell?
Yeah,
um, so Ishii is there. Ishii spent like the whole summer there. My biggest thing is that like they had Ishii lose all the time
yeah.
in a way. I think on one hand we could like count maybe he won a couple of them, but like to lose or one not. Do you think that whenever New Japan wrestlers come over to AEW and whenever they're constantly losing, that sets a bad perception for the audience in general?
I think that's always hard because you hear it on social all the time where it's like this person's being buried, they're not
Mm-hmm.
doing anything right, and
Mm-hmm.
it's always like an ongoing pattern. And I think that's something that AEW needs to do better on because yes, you are bringing stars from New Japan, but it would be nice if you bring some of your stars that are feuding with stars from New Japan over in Japan. And also
Yeah.
that could be really good on continuing that storyline. And also you could provide exclusive footage on a Dynamite. And that could just really continue the storyline and get people very interested.
Yeah. So in your opinion, what AEW storyline should have continued with a New Japan wrestler to go over to Japan?
Oh my god.
If there is
Oh,
any. Listen, we have all the time in the world. Like go ahead.
I'm gonna say one of them is Orange Cassidy and Zack Sabre Jr.
Okay.
I think those guys definitely had something. It was just really sucks because it's like he came over here. I don't think
Okay.
Orange went over to New Japan. I think
No, not
that's
yet.
something. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
not yet.
I want to see. I did like the chemistry between Zack Sabre Jr. and Orange Cassidy. That was pretty cool. I'm trying to think of another rivalry. I know Takeshita was in Japan,
Yeah.
not specifically New Japan, but I'm trying to think of who else.
Oh,
Like
but he
because
he, he wasn't well because he was in AEW, they put him over in New Japan to defeat people in the G1, and I really got upset, and then people got upset at me, and then I was like, no, we're not gonna do that. Just because I didn't like how it happened. But yeah, he was over in the G1 for a bit. So yeah, he was over in Japan doing
he was
stuff.
and and I'm trying to think like because that's the only one that comes to my head. I mean Moxley he faced off against Nato, but it's like I'm trying to think of like who else was in a feud. Like it was not Moxley and Nato, Zack Sabre Jr. and Orange Cassidy. Um
I'm even trying to think for you or with you, with my limited knowledge because I stopped watching AEW. But like, yeah, we see a lot more New Japan guys come over and not do anything
I
in
oh
a way.
you know what? One I
What?
kind of want to see now. I want to see Gabe Kidd versus Mark Briscoe only because there's a lot of history.
Yeah, yeah,
There's a
yeah.
lot of history, and he brought up Mark's brother, and that was a brawl. Like it's on AEW socials, but there was a brawl that happened, and that was one of the few times I ever saw Mark got serious.
I mean, Gabe Kidd now with his talking shit persona, it does get under people's skins. It really does. Not only did it get under Mark's skin, but it also gets under the skin of certain people in the IWC, and it's kind of a little bit funny. But yeah, man, we can't really think of much stories to like really translate over. I mean, the one thing we could think about is like Wrestle Dynasty and those matchups that were there. Like, I would love to see the continuation of Shota Umino going against Moxley. Do you know anything about Shota Umino or any of the story?
No, you can teach me. You can teach me. I'm ready for a lesson.
Okay, so Shota Umino, like if you ever watch like New Japan Pro Wrestling, there's a referee that goes by the name of Red Shoes. So Shota Umino is his son. When Shota Umino was a young lion, someone that was still in training for the dojo and stuff like that, Moxie was over there. This is before AEW became a thing. So Moxie was over there, and he took Shota under his wing to train him, to be his mentor and stuff like that. And then fast forward, we had AEW. Shota's growing up. He graduated. He was also under the wing of like, you know, Tanahashi as well, because he has a hybrid sort of a character between Jon Moxley and Tanahashi. It's weird, but it works. Trust me, it's the weirdest thing ever, but it works. So, lately, everybody has been putting pressure on Shota Umino and the other three musketeers that Japan has named, because Japan now is in a New Hope era with their new regime and their new emperor, the person that like sits in government. So they're in a New Hope era. So they called them like the Three Musketeers. Shota Umino is in it, but people are still giving him pressure of like, bro, you're gonna be the next ace. You're gonna be the next ace, and it's like fucking with him mentally. So he comes out. He gets cheers by women and children, and a little bit of the men in like the first 30 seconds of his entrance, and then when he wrestles, he gets boos. I don't know. So, but he comes out holding his jacket. That's very similar to what like Moxley does when like he holds his jacket and stuff like that. So if you were wondering recently with those like AEW videos of Claudio Castagnoli being like, "Oh no, I'm gonna challenge you, Shota. You're not gonna talk to Moxley just yet." It's because Shota feels very, very slighted that his mentor is not really paying attention to him, and Shota doesn't know what to do. Like, should he embrace this fully? Should he not be the babyface? Should he like? He's just really like freaking confused at this point. So that whole story, if you're wondering, in Wrestle Dynasty was facing Claudio Castagnoli. He beat Claudio Castagnoli, but nothing has happened between, you know, Moxie saying something with Shota Umino. By the way, Shota Umino is definitely a damn good wrestler. He gets it. However, because you know, he has like the Jon Moxley Tanahashi thing going on. He also does like a little bit of like Osprey stuff, like the Hidden Blade or whatever. He hasn't been able to find his own identity, but he's almost there. Okay, but he needs to do it himself. I do think that with time he's going to be a very polished overall good wrestler. But that's the one story that I wanted to see continue from Wrestle Dynasty is after Shota defeated Claudio Castagnoli, go over to AEW for like an excursion and help out with, you know, Edge. Yeah, no, actually go against them, because I would, I would want him to go against the Death Riders, only because Shota has to rid his old mentor, his old life, to become the Shota Umino that, you know, everyone says, "Oh, yo, you are like next in line. You're gonna be the ace." You know, so basically that's like Shota Umino in like a nutshell. And I had to, you know, with my community, I have to be like, guys, I don't understand what's happening with Shota, but this is the best that I can explain it. Kind of deal. But yeah, I wish that Shota could go over to AEW.
I know that could have been like so crazy for him to work alongside Adam Copeland, and continue the Death Rider storyline, because I think, because you know Copeland, he would have him along with Jay White and Willow Nightingale, and even with FTR in the fray.
It would have been a really good experience for Shota too to work with different people, and to just get different ideas and bounce different ideas off and whatnot, and like again become a more rounded person. Even though like what we see on AEW, you and I are like, why are they doing it this way when they could have did it like this route, that kind of deal. But you're still learning from wrestlers behind the scene, and I think that's very like beneficial. I would still love to see Jack Perry go, back and forth between AEW and, New Japan and bring over House of Torture. What do you know about House of Torture?
Oh, I really don't know about it. I'm going to be honest. I really don't know much about it because they never mentioned it. Like after he dropped the title, Danny Garcia, it was just like, but I know that he wrestled at Wrestle Dynasty. I knew for a fact he did.
Wait, you mean House of Torture or, oh yeah, wait, no, Jack Perry did. Yeah.
I knew that he wrestled.
Okay, so I'm only shaking my head because I now remember the story because I was like, oh wait, did he? Yes, he did. I'm only shaking my head because the story that they came up with was that they wanted to bring Yota Tsuji, another good damn wrestler that's part of the Three Musketeers kind of deal over there in Japan. Apparently, he wanted to bring him over to the dark side. That is House of Torture. And I was like, how are you going to get this guy over to House of Torture? Are you going to give him cookies? Because he's not going over there. Like he's really Yota Tsuji is with LIJ with Naito's group. Mm-hmm. So like, why would you want to get somebody over to the dark side? Mm-hmm. That was a story that was being told, and I was like, where? Like, what are you doing? But House of Torture is ran by Evil. With his little minions like Sho, whose nickname is Murder Machine. Is it Murder Machine or Death Machine or something like that? He has a wrench as his weapon. Okay. I say all this. It all sound like cartoons. There's Kanemaru that has the whiskey. And Kanemaru and Sho fought Dustin Rhodes and Sammy Guevara over at Wrestle Dynasty, which is kind of weird. I was like, yo, you should have just flew them out to Ring of Honor and like have the American audience go nuts because the American audience don't like House of Torture. Trust me, they don't. Wow. The only reason why they don't like House of Torture is because they do shenanigans, and like for the good chunk of years that they've been together, right? They do shenanigans in every single match, and the match gets overbooked when they do the shenanigans. So when you see them, you're like, oh my God, I already know how this goes. It's very predictable, and people don't like them because of that. However, I've explained multiple times that the reason why they do that is because the oldest guy that they have with them named Jado, Gato, and oh, wait, no, I'm so sorry. They don't have Jado. People are gonna like destroy me and shit. Like I should know this. Okay, sorry. In House of Torture, they have the oldest wrestler named Dick Togo. Oh. Okay, so basically his name is Dick Togo. So Dick Togo, Gato, and Jado, those three men started out in over here. Well, they started out in Japan, and then they came over here for ECW. So basically, those three were a staple in ECW at the time, and they were learning from everybody. And by the way, Jado and Gato actually fought Team 3D. They actually fought Bubba Ray and Devon Dudley. So I was like, oh my God, that's so awesome. So they went over to Excursion. They ended up being with ECW for a good amount of time, and then when they came back and joined New Japan and got into the positions that they are like already in, which we know that Gato is the booker for like New Japan Pro Wrestling. Dick Togo is the manager to House of Torture, and then Jado is the manager to all of the young up and comer wrestlers, right? So they took their experience from ECW and put it in every single one of their matches. And I'm like, this is why people need to know the history of like what they do in the background and stuff like that to not really get really upset at House of Torture. But I can confirm that most of those matches are very overbooked, but they're kind of fun in a way. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I just keep on rambling. But yeah, that's the history of like stuff that for New Japan.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a lot.
It is. It really is. This is why, like, sometimes having a conversation about like partnerships, right? So in my mind, a partnership is like 50-50. You like give and you take. If somebody needs help, you pick them up. If you need help, it should sort of be like reciprocated depending on what it is. But what I don't like is that it's so obvious the way that Tony Khan like just takes people. And like I get it. Everyone's situation is different. For like why they might need like extra money or what or extra bookings, like I get it. But to do it that obvious, that's why to me it may seem like I come off to other people online as if like I hate everything. I don't want this to happen. I want it to happen because if it improves, everybody at the table gets to eat. Everybody at the table gets to have some type of opportunity that they get from it. I don't see an opportunity where like you're gonna be taking from one company and then being like, oh, these are my guys. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I was thinking about this too because over at WWT, I call Tony Khan Bossman because he's the boss of AEW. Yeah. But I had to really think about this a lot because I know everybody wants to poke at Tony, but I feel like it's more than just a Tony thing because he does have people in that executive office. And I feel like I would not be shocked if it was a lot of influence because, and I talked about this a couple weeks ago with what happened with Ricky Starks. Pride, ego, and money. And I feel like it's not much of a Tony thing. I feel like it's somebody in the executive office because you already know who are the EVPs of AEW.
Yeah.
So I feel like there is something. I mean, I don't want to poke fingers and I don't know what happens behind closed doors, but I feel like I'm just hoping Tony's not influenced by that because I feel like he is a smart person. Last thing I want for him is to be with, as CM Punk would say, corporate, spineless yes people. That's the thing.
I mean,
that's the thing that I would say because I feel like there is something. I don't know what it is because the whole situation, what happened at All Out in Chicago, that from. So it's like Tony, yes, because it's a boss at AEW, but I just feel like there is something within that executive office. I feel like something isn't clicking. And also
that's true.
And that's just me in a way because like I really want AEW to succeed, but sometimes it's like ego has to put on the door. And you can be the best wrestler in the world, but you can be a shitty executive officer in that office.
Yeah, so, that is absolutely true, man. The thing too is that like I think that even though we're talking about the partnership, right? A good partnership works when you don't have dirt sheets constantly putting stories out there, the word out there, whether the stories go against or are praising AEW at this point, any publicity is like bad publicity because it's not helping. It's not having fans gravitate towards it to bring the numbers up. And I know people don't really want to talk about numbers and stuff like that, but like everything contributes to why the partnership looks the way that it looks, all the questions that we have. And then like the dirt sheets don't help because it's like now I have to play the guessing game of like who's lying, who's not lying. Why does Tony always look like the bad guy if he is or isn't the bad guy? And why hasn't Tony tried to clear up anything so that way AEW could get back into the good gracious of like the AEW fans that decided to go away? You know what I mean? Like there has to be a boiling point at one point or another, being as like a human being that has thoughts and feelings rather than just running on, we got to get to the next show. We got to get to the next show. We got to get to the next show. I think it'd be very beneficial for Tony to actually do his own podcast where there's no restraints or whatever, where he could basically tell us what's up and like, leave it at that.
Yeah, I think that's something that Tony, because I feel like he is a smart person. He's not stupid. I just think there is a lot of restraints within that executive office. Either somebody's in his ear or something of what, or it's an ego trip. That's what I'm going to have to say. It is an ego trip.
Yeah.
And I've been talking about this many times because for me, I have nothing against Kenny Omega. He's a great wrestler.
Uh-huh.
I am very critical on the Young Bucks. Not wrestling wise.
Okay.
Wrestling wise, no. But it's just the ego.
Got it.
That's the ego that kind of rubs me off the wrong way. It's just the ego. And I don't know, it may be just me, but it might be some entitlement in there. Maybe because
Got
the
it.
ego. That's probably it. But that's a whole conversation. That's a whole conversation that will take me an hour to get to. But
I mean, listen, if you want to, you can, but I totally get it. I could see it. I could see that it could be an ego thing. It's really sad though, but I do think that like even when they were in Ring of Honor and like when people were pushing back against them and they were and fans were like, oh, they're spot monkeys, they're this, they're that, why they're doing the matches this way, why do we have a super kick party? I believe that they turned into their own memes at times. And they do end up like really showing off that like ego-ness sometimes. So like I'm with you.
That's the problem I had when I talked about this a couple months ago. When the Acclaimed were feuding with them. Because they were one of like the only homegrown tag teams that I could see be serious, because everybody's thinking like, we need Private Party, we need Tough Flight, we need the Outrunners. I was like, but think about this. Who are former tag team champions? Who are the winningest tag team champions? And also, by the way, they have a win over FTR, and they faced the Young Bucks the first time in 2020. So if it's just the lack of execution that made me very upset during that time, because I was very excited. Like, they're going to be 2-time champs. Here we go. But then, of course, FTR had to get in the way. And then it's like FTR and the Young Bucks. And I'm going to be really honest. I do not want to see them again. I do not want to see FTR versus the Young Bucks. I mean, I agree. For me personally, if there was a tag team rivalry, I would have loved to see FTR versus the Acclaimed, because there is a lot there. People don't know this, but there is a lot of friction, because as I mentioned, when they were tag team champions, they wanted to face off against the best tag team, and FTR at that time were carrying all the belts at that time. 2-3 belts. And the thing about it is, when the Acclaimed were tag team champions, they pinned FTR, so they have a win over them. And also, they're no slouches either, because they've organically, I mean, I will say I wasn't the biggest fan, but since I got to learn more about the guys, and Anthony, he's from New Jersey, my home state, and I got to meet both of them separately, Caster and Anthony, and made me a fan, because they are very, very cool with their fans. Like, I've heard nothing but bad things to say when it comes to meet and greets with their fans. But that's the thing that kind of bothered me a bit, because I really wanted them to be 2-time champs and kind of really get to that level. And also, like, with Private Party and everything, with Moxley and all that, like, I get they beat the Young Bucks because the Young Bucks wanted to go on a break, but it's like, okay.
Okay, so let's sort of bring it back to the partnership in a way, because I was just wondering, do you have a subscription to New Japan Pro Wrestling?
I do not.
Do you ever think about getting one?
I have. It's just how much is it?
So basically, it's $9.99. That's what they charged me, because they had to raise the prices a little bit. Like maybe like 3 years ago, it was roughly around like $7. So it still kind of fluctuates between like the $7 and $9 once it gets like converted to US money.
Okay, because like not only New Japan I want to watch, I actually want to watch Stardom, because Stardom really was fascinating for me.
Unfortunately, if you get the New Japan subscription, Stardom is not on there. Yes. So I have the New Japan subscription, because everything that I do is about New Japan Pro Wrestling, and I like watching the matches and like talking about it to everybody. But yeah, unfortunately, Stardom is not on there. They might like include like certain like Stardom matches and whatnot. But I only bring it up because AEW gets a spot on New Japan World. However, you have to be a Japanese subscriber in order to watch AEW Dynamite, Rampage, the pay-per-views, and stuff like that. I am still trying to look for like somebody who is Japanese that could tell me if like that helps them out to know who the AEW wrestlers are. Because every time like an AEW wrestler shows up, whether they do like a video package, the crowds that they go to, depending on the city that they go to, while New Japan is doing their tour across Japan, they do not pop for the AEW wrestlers, and I think that's concerning. Yeah. So okay. So here's another thing. That I'll mention too about the way that New Japan does their tours, because it's different from here in the States of like you have like your local state promotions, and then you have like AEW that like goes around, WWE that goes around and tours around the whole entire world. New Japan Pro Wrestling, because they're on their island, Tokyo, Osaka, any like city heavy base, including like Sendai, would know the wrestlers. And they will pop for the New Japan wrestlers. And if like let's say an AEW guy goes over and they're with them on tour, they'll pop for them. But if they're in a suburban area where it's like farmland and stuff like that, they don't know wrestling like the fans you meet in the city. So the fans you meet in the city, you could think of them like us and how we know wrestling, and somewhat behind, you know, the scenes or whatever. But over in like the farmland area and whatnot, they don't really know too much about it. So they go as an entertainment kind of aspect. So they look at it that way. But yeah, if they're over in like a farmland type of area in Japan, if like the screen pops up and it's like the Young Bucks, when that happened, no reaction at all. They were like, what they there might have been like a tiny bit of reaction for like some people that knew, but altogether nobody really does that. But yeah, that's how like New Japan is in their different audiences too. That's also another thing too, that people online need to remember and realize that not every fan knows about wrestling in other parts of the city and also farmland and like New Japan and like in Japan when they go travel. But yeah, I only bring it up because I just wanted to know if you had any feedback on like, should the AEW dubbed stuff just be for Japanese? Like, I don't know if you wanted to respond to any of that, but yeah, that's just knowledge I want to share.
No. I'm actually happy. I'm always on the learn. I think they should include a dub. I think both like the Japanese part in with English subtitles, so at least people understand it. I mean, yeah. I know a lot of people might not be too familiar with English, but I think in a Japan setting that would be really good. So at least they know. I don't know how familiar they are with like certain stars that wrestled, like a Will Ospreay or a Kenny Omega or a Okada or something like that, but I think that would be like adding in subtitles in there, so at least it'll give them an understanding and also understand the product of AEW.
Yeah, and even some of this stuff, even though they have like the AEW like Japan like Twitter account and stuff like that, and they have like certain things, I just don't know how well it translates to the Japanese audience being like, oh my god, I want to see this AEW wrestler over here, because most of the time, you know, they're popping for like Gabriel Kidd and Bullet Club War Dogs and everybody in there. They're popping for people that they know and they sort of like grow up with, in a sense. But like, yeah, even with Wrestle Dynasty, when we had the pre-show and it was Sammy Guevara and Dustin Rhodes, I was watching it on Japanese commentary, and the Japanese commentators were laying out the whole history of Dustin Rhodes, and they were really excited to have him there, but crickets from the fans. And I was just like, oh, this hurts. Like, it hurt me to see, just because of like, damn. And it felt like that, for all the AEW wrestlers that were at Wrestle Dynasty, that like they were just quiet for, but their hometown New Japan guys, biggest pop of the night. And I was like, oh my god, this is a concern, because if you have a partnership, again, like, people should be popping for both. Usually on my live streams, when I talk about like AEW and like New Japan, I don't want to include WWE, but like for people to understand the bigger picture, we all pop for Jordan Grace,
Mm-hmm.
We all pop for any of the, wrestlers that go over from TNA over to WWE when they show up, and that speaks volumes. I feel a sneeze coming on. Why? um, but it speaks volumes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that speaks a lot of volumes.
I should be okay. But yeah, so if you wanted to watch Stardom, right? Because somebody in chat was telling me that it's Wrestle Universe that you'll have to get a subscription to, because that gives you. Oh no, wait, hold on, what? Oh, you know, actually, just type in Stardom. You probably just get it on their own thing. But Wrestle Universe gets you Pro Wrestling Noah, which Noah was my first introduction to Japanese wrestling, thanks to the matchup of Kenta and Takeshi Morishima back in Ring of Honor, all the way back in the day. Gets you DDT Pro. That's where Konosuke is from. Just be careful when you watch DDT Pro. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Because things get weird. Just they get weird. They have regular matches, but then they get weird. TJPW, which is the other little sister promotion other than Stardom. There's Marigold, which is ran by Rossi. There's Sendai Girls, another all women's wrestling promotion over there, and then there's Grand Pro as well. But yeah, you could probably just type in Stardom and stuff like that, and just get a subscription. But unfortunately, they don't have that where it's New Japan and Stardom together. I wish they did. But there was that question that I wanted to ask about the whole, they have the AEW stuff on there. Now, in terms of improving, do you have 5 top things for how they can improve before anybody says they never talked about improving?
Send some of your stars on the AEW side. Send some of your stars who've always wanted to go to Japan. Send them. That's all they need. Just send them. Because
that's it.
I mean, well, that's pretty much because we have seen stars from New Japan come to AEW. I think it would be nice for some stars to oversee, because we always hear many times that they always wanted to wrestle in Japan, but they never had the chance to do it. I would have loved to see some of the tag teams within AEW oversee in Japan outside of the Young Bucks. No disrespect to them wrestling wise, but it just would be nice to see another tag team within that division, because if you're not using them for in your tag team division or the tag team titles, you could at least go oversee them and challenge them for the IWGP tag team titles, and also really continue that storyline within them. And they could actually learn a lot wrestling wise in Japan, because we have seen some stars who went to New Japan or Stardom and they've gotten better wrestling wise when they came back. But so it's just really kind of continuing those storylines, and just have people crossover. Number one. Number two, they need to highlight Tanahashi's retirement tour. They really, really do.
Well, I mean, he retired. He's gonna retire next year, which is the strangest thing. But yeah, I get it.
It's just they the minute they announced it, they could have did similar to John Cena. Well, not the heel-wise, but similar. They could have and do his retirement tour where it's not just on New Japan. He could come to AEW for a bit and just really work his way around it and kind of possibly, make an appearance at Forbidden Door.
Yeah.
That's something to think about. And also, I would probably say the third thing is their women's division. I would like to see, outside of Mina, because there's a lot of people from Stardom, and I don't know about New Japan women's, but I would like to see some of them come in, not just on AEW, but I would like to see some of the AEW women appear on Stardom. Like we had Willow Nightingale, we had Anna Jay appear in there, we had Tay appear in there recently, where she teamed up with Mina Sharkana, and of course we had Toni Storm that was on there. So it would be nice to see a little bit of shift, and also create a lot more rivalries that don't revolved around the titles. Because I feel like they are including rivalries that insert the titles, but there are some rivalries that can tease a bit. I would love to see Deonna Purrazzo and Taya Valkyrie go into Stardom or New Japan and wrestle. I would love for Thunder Rosa to go over to Japan.
Yeah.
There are so many stars. Like, heck, I wouldn't even mind for Jamie Hager to go back to Japan. I know right now she is dealing with visa issues.
Yeah.
So she's kind of working on that. That's why she's wrestling in the UK still. But the minute she gets her visa worked out, she's going back to work for AEW.
Yeah. So a little history about like New Japan and like their like women's division. So like you could think of their women's division as just Stardom. Because in Japan they keep both sexes separated. It took them a long time to even think about and try to do the whole like what WWE did with the mixed match challenge. So like New Japan has this successful crossover between Stardom and New Japan Pro Wrestling where they do have men and women tag team and like face each other. Which, by the way, biggest grossing number for subscriptions on both New Japan and Stardom. So, like, that skyrocketed. They just had another successful year of doing that, like, recently. For last year, and to me that's one of my favorite like pay-per-views to like watch, where you take the Stardom women and like they're all sassy, by the way, like they're all sassy. Whenever they choose their tag team partner, they're sassy and it works. I'm like, this is great. But it took them years to get to that point, and I think that's one of the positives of like having social media and being like, hey, I think it's time for you guys to do just at least a mixed challenge match where like you have your Stardom, your NJPW wrestler, they have a tag team match. Awesome. That's cool. New Japan is also warming up to the idea of having hardcore matches because before it was just like you have to settle it in the ring, no hardcore matches. Those tables are real, so like you really could end up like injuring yourself. But when it comes to like the women's thing, the thing that we have now is called the IWGP Women's Championship title that Mayu has at currently. I don't think she lost it yet. And that's a weird. It's only a weird title because again, social media was like, oh, you guys should have this title, and they did it. But it's not represented as well as like the Stardom Championship titles or the NJPW Strong Women's title. So like, in the event that Mercedes gets the IWGP Women's Championship title again, you guys are probably gonna have to talk about it on Women's Wrestling Talk. It's gonna be one of those things of like the history of it, where it came from, stuff like that. But I just feel like it's not needed because New Japan doesn't have a women's division. Now, I do appreciate when the women are on New Japan Pro Wrestling and they get their spots for having a match, but they're not as concerned with them as they are with the men, and that's just because of how the thinking is over in Japan to keep both sexes like separated. If you want to know why there's no women's division in New Japan Pro Wrestling, they did try before, but they were just like, no, we're gonna get rid of it, and they did it like that. But I do think that like if they ever did decide to have both a men's division and a women's division, even though I love watching the Stardom women wrestle, it might the men might overshadow them and slightly they might overshadow them, only because of like when they go on tour, everyone is expecting the men, and most of the fans are mothers and kids that goes. You have your audience as men that go to the New Japan shows, but if you ever tune in to watch Stardom, most of the audience are men, because sometimes they have these girls do like sexy stuff. So like the male gaze is there when you watch the audience. You could probably you might see some like few females, but you'll see male mostly at Stardom. And then when it comes to NJPW, it's mothers, children, and like in between the ages of like maybe 18 to like 50-ish for men. but that's like sprinkled in. That's how their audience works. But yeah, how I would fix everything and improve everything is that everybody has to sit down at the table. Everyone has to start telling the truth, and everyone has to start kicking out the dirt sheets in order for this to survive. If anybody is, I'll just say it, if anyone is a snake around that table, they gotta get kicked out. Because a partnership is not going to survive if somebody wants to do underhanded tactics and do it out in the open and be so obvious about it, and then there's no repercussions about it. Once you have everything cleared and everyone is on the same page, at least 80%, because in 10% something could go wrong and you might need a little wiggle room to be like, we got a plan B. So once everybody's on board for like 80%, then you could start putting online the good faith kind of stuff and putting those packages that we talk about like, you know, oh, this is this wrestler, this is what this wrestler did, because Gabe Kidd has a history in him as a young lion, and then him with his mentally horrible, but he's like still with us now. Like he has a lot. And that should be seen. A video package for like Ishii, a video package for Tanahashi, a video package of like, how do we get here sort of deal, you know? And then utilize what you can with social media to bring everybody together and make it seem as if like we are all a community, meaning that like, you know, by me just talking to you about New Japan Pro Wrestling, it can raise, you know, an eyebrow to be like, oh, I'm curious. Let me go check it out. Let me go get a subscription for like 1 month, or let me tune into one of Marie's like, you know, tape study series where she goes over a match or whatever. Like it sparks an interest. And we do this as a community, the same way that you're talking to me about AEW, even though like I don't really watch AEW anymore, but I'm on board with you that certain things have to change in order for me to come back. And even me just saying that, like, I was interested in the whole Jack Perry kind of turn and whatnot, and let's see what's gonna happen. I was like, oh shit, I might give it a try again. Let's see what happens. And then it was like, oh no, we lost a moment. Of course you guys lost a moment. You know what I mean? But I would just really be really strict and be like, look, guys, we all have to be on the same page. In the process, learn some Japanese if you can for the language barrier, because that shit might be like really annoying to some people. And yeah, send over some AEW wrestlers that are not doing anything, that are sitting at home and being like, yo, go on excursion and stuff like that. But yeah, that's what I would do to like really get down into the weeds, as they say. I don't know if I should use that phrase, but yeah.
That works. Okay. I understood what you were saying.
Okay, because I'm like, why did that pop into my head? But it felt right in the moment. It felt right. I don't know if you want to respond to any of that, because I would like to take at least 4 questions from chat if they're quick enough to give me some 4 questions. I'm only taking 4 questions, chat, just 4 questions, so make them good. But I don't know if you want to respond to any of that while we wait for questions, and then that'll be it. We'll wrap up.
No, pretty much. I mean, you kind of said it there, and that was another thing you kind of mentioned, like, Boss Man, he needs to get everybody from New Japan, even CMLL, Stardom, like everybody to see like what is the vision, like what is the original vision that you want for this partnership. Like, what is it that you guys really want to make this successful? Because they have talented people on the roster, but they just need to like figure out where they need to go. So that's, for me, it's just Kid and King, everybody in the room, and figure out what's going on. And yes, as someone that works in the PR and media industry, I do have strong feelings when it comes to dirt sheets. That's a whole different thing. It's like you kind of need to get rid of them, or I don't know how each media person does it, but for us, we always have a blackball list. That's where we like kind of ban people from it. So it's like kind of like a blackball in a way, but I think that's really something to think about.
Yeah. So, okay, so we got 2 coming in. This is from College Guy Wrestling, which he's definitely a buddy of mine and stuff like that. He says, what are your thoughts with the United Japanese Wrestling Companies and how New Japan has handled all of this for future partnerships? Do you know anything about the United Japanese Wrestling Company?
I feel like I've heard of them, but not too familiar with it.
Okay, so think about how NWA is doing like the territories kind of deal where they're
Oh,
like getting different promotions coming in and stuff like that. So yeah, so basically that's what that is. The reason why the United Japanese Wrestling Companies got created in Japan, they are a non-profit organization, and they are there to help each other out in times of need, and it's basically a way to just help each other because they realized during the pandemic they were like, oh fuck,
yeah.
we got to help each other. So quickly, my thoughts is that it's a good thing, because it sort of like protects the companies in a
Yes.
way, and then they can also like collaborate and stuff like that. So like New Japan Pro Wrestling in the past before this has collaborated with like Pro Wrestling Noah, and that was a fun event. Stardom could collaborate with other people and stuff like that. So it's a opportunity for that. And how New Japan has handled all this for future partnerships. That's the one part of the question where I'm like, I'm not sure, only because of like within this partnership of like all the Japanese companies, I don't know if they're going to be having outside companies come in yet. So that's also something to look out for. But I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
I think you kind of explained it there. I'm really happy that they are doing it territorial rise as they did like when NWA did it back in like the early
Mm-hmm.
days before WWE came into the uh friction. But I do think it's a really great way, but it also builds a lot of community in the wrestling business. And of course, like you and I know, and a lot of fans know, it is very small. It's a very small, tight knit community
Yeah, it
where
is.
it does provide a lot of support opportunities. You just have to make sure you don't BS around and throw people under the bus. But it definitely provides a lot of support within all the respective territories.
Yes. So our second question is by MD. Who's the best Japanese woman wrestler not in the US?
Oh, well, I'm actually going to name one because I know it from Stardom. It's going to be Mina Shirokana, only because I learned a lot about her. And
Mm,
also when she wrestled, like not just in Stardom, but also in Japan. And also, I did not know she started off a career as a model, then turned into wrestling.
that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot
Uh,
of sense. I never knew about the model thing, but I'm like, oh, it makes sense now.
yeah, because AEW did a package on her, and they talked about her like when she started off as modeling, and then she
Hmm.
wrestled in Japan, and then of course she did Club Venus with Mariah
Yeah, yeah,
May, and also seeing some of the matches that she had, and I did like they threw in some of the archive footage when she was wrestling in Japan.
yeah. So I'm gonna have to say, Starlight Kid. If you have not checked out any of Starlight Kid's matches, just Google Starlight Kid, and like I use Daily Motion if like I need to like look something up. But Starlight Kid, best like women's wrestler I've seen in Japan that's not in the US. She has a certain confidence and charisma about her. Her wrestling is definitely top notch. She is like somewhat as like an average girl, but like on the smaller side. She wears a mask and stuff like that. She tag teamed with El Desperado from New Japan Pro Wrestling when they did the historic New Japan Stardom X crossover. Like, I sing her praises. If this question ever gets brought up again, but like I sing her praises. So whenever you have the time, just check out any Starlight Kid matches. You're not
Okay.
gonna be disappointed. Like I will put her over 1,000%. Um, this next question from the Wraith. I was gonna say the Wrath. It's not even Wrath. Um, what's your favorite event this year so far?
Oh my
I don't know.
god.
I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna let you take this one because I don't even know.
I don't even know. I guess so far, oh my god, there's so much. Um I'm trying to think. I would probably say there's a few.
Uh huh.
There is a few, but I guess on the AEW front, I'm gonna go with Wembley Stadium from last year because that was the first time I ever watched Wembley Stadium like on a pay-per-view,
Okay.
and that was pretty awesome on an international level. That was really great. Full Gear is another one because I went there in person. That was actually my first AEW pay-per-view I went in person ever.
Oh, cool.
And just seeing that in person, it was just crazy. Like seeing like Bobby Lashley take on Swerve Strickland, the tag team match. Also, everybody cheering for Orange Cassidy when he was facing off against Jon Moxley. Seeing Willow Nightingale return, it was a pretty good one. And then Will Ospreay versus Kyle Fletcher, that was definitely something to say so far. Also, getting ready for tomorrow, Revolution, AEW Revolution tomorrow. I mean, my gal Toni Storm, she's facing off against Mariah May tomorrow. She's the woman. She's the woman that got me into AEW, but I liked her way before Timeless came out. But I do have a quick story. It'll be very quick. So when this is when she was released from WWE, and this was like 2022 of March, because this is when like we were starting to come back in person and everything was starting to become a normalcy. And I went to a meet and greet in Philadelphia, and it was at the historic ECW arena. So there was many wrestlers that were there. There was Bret Hart, Matt and Jeff Hardy, Mickie James, Victoria, a lot of other people. But there was Toni Storm there, and she did not have anybody at her table. So I went over to her. Yeah, this was like right after she was released from WWE. She didn't have not many people come to her table.
Whoa.
So I went over to her table and I took a photo. I had an autograph, and we chatted for a bit. And I said, look, I know with everything going on, it's been crazy, but you're going to find something you're going to do well in. And I gave her a hug, and then we went our separate ways. And a few days later, she was on AEW, and I started watching it ever since.
That is so sweet, man. But I do feel bad too to know that nobody was at her table. Like, that's kind of weird.
It was not many.
But that's a very, very, very sweet gesture. Very sweet. So I don't know. What's my favorite event this year? You know what I'm going to consider as an event, just for the sake of this, is that I'm going to consider John Cena turning heel as an event.
I just didn't want to point the obvious, because I'm like, okay, we already know Elimination Chamber. But like in all seriousness, everybody, like honestly, when you get ESPN First Take and social you all over the world, that's like,
the only reason why I brought it up and to answer the question is because I couldn't really think of an event that I liked so far, and then I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna go with it and be kind of cheeky and be like, yeah, John Cena turned heel.
It's been a long time coming, because people started to like John when he was a babyface. People did not watch him during his heel run during the Ruthless Aggression era, like I did, or coming in 2002, 2003, and he was just a babyface for that long, and people just came in when he was starting to be popular.
Yeah. I was definitely celebrating, because I was like, finally, we asked for this. Especially us who are like born in the 90s and stuff like that. I guess we are millennials. I don't really care, but I'm getting older. I'm getting older. We are gonna take one more, and then we're just gonna wrap up. MD, do not feel slighted. I'm not going to pick yours, but you did say, what do you think of John Cena winning number 17 at WrestleMania 41? I could have a conversation about that after this. But this one is kind of interesting. This is from G Coalition. He's also a good friend of the channel, because he keeps me on my toes whenever it comes to like the history or whatever I'm missing for like New Japan and AEW. So like, that's where we are buddies there. So he says, would AEW take a hit or actually benefit if a card took place between the two companies where NJPW wins the majority of the matches and recovers / retains all their championships? That's a loaded question. I should have read it better.
That is a loaded question.
Damn, G.
That is a loaded question. He came prepared. I think this is just me. I think it would be beneficial. I think it would be beneficial. I don't think it's going to take a hit, but I think if you let some of your New Japan stars that are in AEW soil win, that could be a benefit and also could lead to a storyline and continue that going. And also with the fact it'll help with the partnership, possibly focus on the next Forbidden Door. We know Forbidden Door is going to be in London this year in August. That could also be beneficial in the play. I think it's just kind of making sure that it's very evenly and it's like not many stars wins over the others, because I know the last year when I watched Forbidden Door, it was very odd. I think there was probably no more than one or two people from New Japan that actually won. I know Zack Sabre Jr. was one of them, but I think he was like one of the only people from New Japan that actually won at Forbidden Door. So I think it would not hurt. I think it would benefit if some of the stars from New Japan would win, because it'll give a taste of the American audience and who they are. They're not slouches, and even when they pin some of their favorite superstars, then it's like, oh, they're the real deal.
Yeah. Just to, really just say, because I'm not gonna like go too much into this, I would like some selected New Japan stars to win AEW belts and make the story around that as a chase, because AEW obviously 6 years going strong, right? They're still here. Have the New Japan wrestler be like, "Oh, you guys are nothing. See how easy I took that belt away from you guys. Now you have to come onto my home turf and see if you can go through like the rigorous training and blah blah blah, the rigorous matches and all this kind of stuff." Like that will get people excited. It might end up being cinema, like everybody says. But I would definitely love to see some New Japan stars hold some AEW belts, just to create a feud, just to create some talking points. Because right now, AEW needs some like good talking points.
They have a lot of belts, by the way.
Yeah,
they have a lot of belts.
They do. And by the way, I made a whole video about New Japan and all of their belts. And even that, to me, doing that video was sort of annoying, because I was like, "Oh my god, I have to go to this belt, that belt, this belt, that belt," and whatnot. But I did it because, like, everybody online, obviously was saying the same thing, that like there's too many belts, there's too many belts. So I was like, you know what? I'll do the work for you guys. Here's a whole list of all the New Japan belts and what they mean, what they do, and everything like that. But with that being said, we could talk forever on this. We could definitely have chat come in here and like ask questions and stuff like that. But I am glad that we got, to talk about this. And this is two perspectives from women who watch wrestling and who want the best for professional wrestling, and stuff like that, which you don't really get to hear a lot, only because of like, situations, weird shit. And then, it's more about like, do we have like similar thought patterns? We really do. But I do appreciate the fact that, to me, I feel like this was like cutting it close, since it's the weekend and I wanted you to like prepare for AEW tomorrow and like, take it easy and relax. But I appreciate you being like, Saturday, we'll do it Saturday.
Yes.
So, put yourself over. Let everybody know where they can find you. And I will second everything that you say after you're done.
Yeah, the people can always find me. I'm over at Women's Wrestling Talk every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Every Wednesday, I do a watch along for Dynamite. You can always find me there. I will be doing a watch along tomorrow for AEW Revolution. So make sure to subscribe on Women's Wrestling Talk, because we are breaking down everything, doing a little bit of predictions and then play by play without the whole show. They can also follow me on my Instagram and Twitter account on at CourtneyNJ11, content where it's not just wrestling, but a little dabble of me, where I work in the PR industry. I dabble in the pageant world, also wrestling as well. I do have a lot of content because me and the rest of the team got to attend the red carpet premiere of Queen of the Ring, which is out now, and it was definitely a fun experience. There's a lot more content. I strongly recommend anybody watching it, because March is Women's History Month. Today is International Women's Day. This film really exemplifies women's wrestling. So please, please, please watch the film.
Nicely put. So all of my fans and my community, go over to Women's Wrestling Talk and subscribe and high five them. I don't know why my brain wanted to say high five them, but high five them. I also like being there as a panelist whenever I get the opportunity to, because I like talking about wrestling. So I appreciate Women's Wrestling Talk in that regard. As you guys know, I'm Marie Shadows. Please make sure to hit that like button and also subscribe to youtube.com/Square Circle Podcast. You can find Square Circle Podcast on all podcasting platforms, including Spotify. And also sign up to my wrestling newsletter, marieshadows.substack.com. That wrestling newsletter gives you a lot more interesting details about the world of wrestling, including my tape study series, new series called Inside the Locker Room, which I'm going to be hopefully starting up soon. I have a lot of passion projects just to do behind the scenes stuff for professional wrestling. And also the newsletter also debunks certain tweets that people still want me to apologize for, and I'm not going to apologize. So you guys could keep tweeting at me, and it's not going to happen. Other than that, follow both of us. Thank you for being here. Everybody in chat, I love you guys. Thank you so much. And both me and Courtney will see you on either the next live stream or I hop over to Women's Wrestling Talk. Who knows? But from both of us, bye-bye.